Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Thomas Vanderkin here. We're live today. I'm so excited. We got a guest, Michele Cantara from AANE. Hi, Michele.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we do this kind of weekly. We have the guests on this kind of chat format on the Vanderkinverse, but we're talking about autism and neurodiversity. Got to meet you a couple weeks ago, talked a lot about AANE and your history in tech and how you got into this current role you're in now. So maybe we'll just start there. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got to AANE?
Sure. I'm Michele Cantara, and I am currently a Neurodiversity Training Specialist at AANE. And I have slides, and I'm probably going to bounce around in this slide deck. And for anybody who actually wants to download these slides, I'll post a link to them in the chat. They're here. But kind of my story about how I came to AANE is further on in the slide deck. So I'm going to bounce along over there, figure out where it is. So my journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of have an interesting background. I have an undergraduate in psycho and sociolinguistics. And since I graduated in 1981, when cognitive science and kind of psycho and sociolinguistics was sort of getting started, there really wasn't a BA in that. So it was a self-design major, and it was really an interesting study of how people learned language and how language worked and how people used language in society. Later on, I got an MBA, and I spent 35 years in the high-tech industry. Never really did much specifically with the psycho and sociolinguistics degree. But in the high-tech industry, I did a lot in product management, mostly in software. And I ended up at Gartner for about 17 years. And in the latter part of my career at Gartner, I kind of did management consulting and business process management and organization and change management. And that became a really good background for what I do now at AANE. And because a lot of what I do at AANE is I work with autistic adults, I work with parents and families, and a lot of it has to do with changing the parenting dynamic, changing the family dynamic, and a lot of it is organization and change, but it's around families and individual relationships. Now, in terms of my own personal background, in 1991, I had a son named Joseph. And I kind of knew by the time he was 3 months old that there was something very different about Joe. Joe, even as a very young infant, communicated differently. And I felt like I had landed on planet Joe. And I knew that there was something going on. I didn't know what. And it was fortunate that I had the undergraduate degree that I had, because it allowed me to really, let's say, confront his pediatrician ultimately and say, look, I worked with preschool deaf kids, and we shared a vocabulary of 20 signs. And we communicated. We had better and richer conversations than I have with my son, who at the time he was 3, had a vocabulary of 1,000 words and perfect grammar. I said, I don't know what that is, but it's a something.
Yeah.
And having that expertise allowed me to get Joe diagnosed at about age 4. Otherwise, he might have been 12.
Yeah. And that's 27 years ago, I guess, if he's 31 now. So.
Right. And thank God for that degree, even though I didn't necessarily use it in business. I've used it personally all throughout his life. And it actually does have some applicability to my technology career, but it wasn't obvious at the time. So that's kind of my background. And then So why did I switch careers? Why did I spend 35 years in high tech? Well, after a while, you get a little old. And you're a little sick of being on planes. Um, and when you're 55 years old and you're on yet another red-eye flight, you're like, why? Why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm too old for doing this. And then it's like, well, okay, it's time to stop doing this and to pay it forward to all the moms who helped me
Good for you.
when Joe was 4 or 5. And ultimately, it was really about creating an infrastructure for Joe as an adult, because there isn't enough out there for autistic adults, so that they can live authentic, independent, fulfilling lives. Kind of everything stops at age 22.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, my program management, change management, process design skills are strangely applicable to helping adults and families and employers change behavior and make a difference. So I thought, now's the time.
Did the Asperger Autism Network already exist as a group, and you just joined it, or what kind of?
Yeah. Let me go back to that.
Okay, maybe I'm jumping, but I'm so fascinated because a lot of this is very familiar to my story. I also have a child who was Asperger autism, and been in tech for a long time. You were at Compaq HP. I've been at IBM, Lenovo.
Right.
But still, now I've started this company, autism staffing group, trying to help. But we have sort of a lot of parallels, and just we want to. But anyway, yeah. So all that, I'm almost getting emotional. But let's go back to how you got to what Asperger Autism Network is.
AANE has been around for 26 years, and my son has been involved with AANE since about 2007 or 2008.
Okay.
So I've known about them for a long time. And so 26 years ago, AANE was started specifically to address an unserved cohort of individuals with Asperger's. And those folks with Asperger's are now known as individuals with autism, because Asperger's isn't an official diagnosis anymore.
Yeah.
And we still kind of serve that same cohort of people, although now we've kind of broadened that, because that might also include people with nonverbal learning disabilities or social communication disorder, similar kinds of things, similar neurodiverse profiles. AANE started out as an organization in Boston. And since then, we've really broadened to become a national organization, particularly post-COVID, because during COVID, we moved all of our services online. And we found that there was huge, huge demand for our services across the country and actually throughout the world. So while I wouldn't say we're international, we do have a number of clients from other countries. And so that's been a really, really huge difference, I think, in the past few years. It's moving from a very regional to a national focus, and I'm really proud to have been a piece of that. So AANE was kind of in the back of my mind as where do I want to go when I want to semi-retire and stop taking red eyes?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And your son was already in the program then, or he joined after you?
No, he had been, I sort of semi-retired from Gartner in 2016, and Joe had been a LifeMap client, which is our AANE's one-on-one coaching program, since about 2007 or 8, when that program first started.
Got it. Okay. Well, we're starting to get people to join and watching the stream. So if anybody wants to leave a comment, let us know where you're listening from is great. And also, if you have any questions for Michele, put that in the comments also.
Right.
Can you tell us some more about what AANE's programs are, how it works, and let's get into some of the details.
Well, so one of the reasons I put the link to the slide deck in the chat is because there are links within the PDF so that if you want to get to some of our AANE services, they're right in the slide deck.
Perfect.
So AANE serves three constituents primarily. One of the things that we do that is much different than that of other organizations is we focus primarily on adults, because most services end at age, let's say 17 or 22. There aren't a lot of services out there for adults, whereas there's tons of things out there for children. So we've elected to provide a lot of services to adults, autistic adults, and we have recently restarted providing some services for older teens. We provide services directly to family and friends of children, teens, and adults, and that includes grandparents, other relatives, and also spouses and partners of autistic individuals. And that is fairly unique to us as well.
Yeah.
And we also have like links to a neurodiverse partners institute that trains therapists for neurodiverse coaching and therapy, neurodiverse partners therapy, I mean. And we also provide services to professionals who work with autistic individuals and families. And we provide training, community training to all kinds of organizations, whether it's employers or healthcare providers, first responders, and so on. And I don't know how far you want to go into this, but these are the services we provide for adults and teens. So I would say the core service we provide is what we call free information and resource calls. So adults may send us a form and ask us a question about help me find a diagnostician or a therapist, or they might want to schedule a call with us to chat and sometimes people just want to be listened to and validated. It's a lot of what we do. And the life map coaching skills is what my son used starting back in 2007. That is one-on-one coaching and skills development. It's not therapy, it's skills development. And in his case, it was to help him find a job. And they helped him find a job at TJX. And I mean, he works as a retail clerk, and he has done that off and on while he's been going to school. And it has been fairly successful, and it's a reasonably understanding environment for him. And so for other folks, they might work on dealing with anxiety and or social skills and improving social skills in a work environment, or maybe social skills in a school environment, or executive functioning skills at school, whatever it is. They'll break it down into manageable chunks and have a short-term goal. One of the things that we do, and I used to do as co-director of adult services, is manage a lot of support groups. So I don't even know how many support groups we have. I have scores at this point.
Okay.
Most of them are now online. We've put a few back into being in person, mostly in the Boston area. But these are facilitated peer support groups. They're not therapeutic groups. They're moderated by AANE facilitators. And most of them are online. Many of them are free. These are ones you can casually sign up for. You don't have to commit to going to them like weekly or monthly. Others are for fee, and they have the same individuals, like, for 12 weeks or 8 months or what have you.
Okay.
You get to know the same people over and over again. But we have a pricing policy. It's kind of like pay what you can afford.
Okay. That's for the support group, but I imagine the life map where it's like one-on-one coaching, that is a fee service, right?
That is a for fee service. In
Sure.
certain states like Massachusetts and New Hampshire, some of the public agencies will fund it under certain circumstances.
Okay. But how valuable to have somebody who it's always good to be listened to and be heard. But if the person you're listening to has heard, this story 100 times, they actually
Yeah.
can, put together they can listen, active listening, I guess, rather than just kind of passive. So what an opportunity to have somebody who is familiar with many other people who are going through the same journey.
Well, and as a parent, I find that, um, in a sense, I can outsource some of the things I might do with my son to a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and it pulls me out of that role, which makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, and then we have a ton of social activities because what we heard is we feel isolated. We want to be able to get together in a safe social environment. So we've done things like improv workshops with the Improv Asylum in Boston, and we've done those online. We have a writer's workshop. We have tons of game nights. We have a book club. So we have a ton of things going on. We have coaching for neurodiverse couples, and then we've just started up LifeNet independent living support in the past couple of years. And that is kind of, I would say, integrated case management that kind of pulls together the various services an individual might have um, to help somebody live independently. Right now, that's only in Massachusetts, New York, and Connecticut.
Okay.
My dream is it happens everywhere across the US someday.
Uh, are there other organizations like yours doing the same thing in other states, or is it really that's why you're seeing such high demand? It's because
I think
everyone's
there
coming to
are
you.
organizations that do pieces of what we do. Um, yeah,
Okay.
um, yeah.
It
I'm not.
just seems so valuable. I think that you're going to. Hopefully, a lot of people see this. I'm sure they're finding you already, but anything I can do to help, promote all the great
That
work you're
would be
doing.
awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And then for parents and families, we have similar kinds of services. The coaching we do for parents is a little different. That's more um, not ongoing coaching. It's individual sessions to help prioritize what do you want to tackle first, because it's often overwhelming to figure out what kind of benefits do you want to find for your kid, which of the issues facing you do you want to tackle first, because um, sometimes it's hard to peel apart um, what problems you think you want to address with your child first, because you don't want to overwhelm them or you.
Mhm.
And there's a bunch of support groups as well for parents and also grandparents and couples.
Yeah, I'm. As I said, I'm hosting this kind of weekly discussion, and what I'm hearing is a lot of parents are like, "My kid is 25 and about to age out of our health insurance. We're panicking. Like what happens next?"
Well, I can answer that. We have a benefits conference coming up on March 25th, and you can register for that by March 24th. There's actually a slide towards the end of the slide deck with a link in it. So I'm not going to go there, but you can do that. You can, under certain employer plans, petition your employer to extend coverage by making the case that you have a child with autism and a disability, um, that your child should be on your private employer's plan for a longer period of time.
Hmm.
The employer is not required to do so legally. They can do it because they're being nice people.
Being okay.
And they may do it simply because they want to encourage employee loyalty and they want you to stick around.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I didn't even consider that. Um, my child, 28, so aged out of our insurance, got their own insurance through Obamacare. The plan they were using here in North Carolina decided to pull out of North Carolina. And then when they went to sign up for the next plan that is here in North Carolina, checked the box that said they had autism, and they came back and said, "Sorry, we're not accepting any new pre-existing conditions, including autism, into our group, and they were rejected just because they checked the box that said autism. So we had to go help them find another another plan in the Obamacare system that would accept people with autism.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's just, it's just everybody struggles. And if you talk to anybody in the world for more than 5 minutes and ask them how they're doing, they hurt. But if you bring autism into it, which we all have things we bring into our lives, that's just another struggle. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, let's then I see couples counseling conferences. You just have so much going on and so much benefit that you can bring. Do you get funding for your organization, government funding as part of this, or is it all privately
Very
funded?
little. Very, very little. The majority of it is private donations and some for fee services.
Is there you have a lot on here. Is there one of these that's majority of what you do? You said probably it's the counseling.
Well, I would say the majority of our work is probably the free information and resource calls, followed by we do the life map coaching, and the support groups and the social activities, and the support groups of parents.
So I saw a lot of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, the bulk of it is programs that we deliver.
Programs.
Yeah.
I saw when you were flipping through the slides, you have a lot of other material. Can you show us something else that what else we'd like to look at?
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to mention, and you had asked me to talk a little bit about this, is, how does AANE view autism? What are new ways of thinking about autism? And so one of the things that we talk about these days is using a neurological lens to reframe the way you think about autism. So if you look at what is autism, well, it's a set of neurobiological differences that affect how information is processed. If you view it through the medical model, a diagnostic model, it's a disability. And those neurobiological differences, the processing differences, affect how people communicate, how they communicate verbally and non-verbally. So how do they interpret non-verbal cues like body stance, cadence, gestures, tone of voice, and all of that? How do they handle pragmatics or conversation and conversational turn taking and all of that? What's the person's ability to form and sustain relationships? That's often a challenge for many people with autism. Executive functioning, kind of the ability to complete complex tasks and projects and maintain attention. Self-regulation is a big one. And inside of that, there's kind of pieces of regulation, the ability to regulate sensory input. A lot of people are overly or underly sensitive to sensory input like smell and taste and touch and sound, even visual cues like light. But there are some new things coming on as well, new areas called interoception, which is kind of how the body makes sense of what its internal organs are telling it. And there's some research that says sometimes people with autism can't tell if they're thirsty or hungry. It's very hard for them to understand what their feelings are. So that plays a role in ability to communicate and to kind of understand what's going on with other people as well. And then, so attentional regulation is an issue as well. So a lot of times you'll see that folks with autism may also be diagnosed with ADHD. And then emotional regulation. Sometimes people with autism may also be diagnosed with a bipolar disorder because they may have some emotional ups and downs. So self-regulation can be a challenge for some people. Concept generalization and learning may also be another issue. And if you look at what Temple Grandin writes about, she talks about, thinking and seeing in pictures. So in order for her to develop the concept of chair, she had to see like millions of pictures of chairs and things you sit on in her mind before she understood the concept of chair. And so those are it can make it harder for people to learn. What autism isn't is it's not a thing that you can outgrow, or it's not something that can be cured. So I know some people don't want to label a kid, and they'll say, "Oh, he's just a boy," or "She's just young. They'll outgrow it." Probably not. It's not a behavioral disorder. There may be some behaviors that could be seen as a problem in school or at home, but there are some reasons behind those behaviors that you can probably uncover, and if you remove those reasons, the behaviors will probably go away. It's not an emotional disorder. It's not caused by refrigerator mothers or something. It's not a mental illness. It's also not linear, and by that I mean, if you use the term high functioning or low functioning autism, that suggests that everybody's symptoms or difficulties progress in a nice linear manner, and they don't, because there's really a spectrum of challenges that everybody manifests in different ways. So it's not like you're going to go from light blue to dark blue in a linear fashion, or high functioning to low functioning in a linear fashion. It's going to be a cluster of challenges in different ways, and it's going to look different for everybody, if that makes any sense. So that's one.
It does. And this list, to me, is so helpful, and the way you explained it is so helpful. I have so many thoughts and comments. And first of all, the outgrown or cured, I feel like in my child, when we been on this journey together with our family, it may look like in some ways they're outgrowing it, but it's just that they've learned social behaviors enough that they may not feel the right thing to do in a situation, but they've learned how to behave in a situation that looks like they're cured, but they're just just acting in a way that society thinks is, typical.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And it might take a heck of a lot of energy for them to not act the way they used to. And they might not be happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And in labeling it a disability, that kind of viscerally, I don't like that. I mean, you've even named the title of this discussion, Learning to Love Autism, right? So a disability, I guess you think, well, if you could get rid of it, you would want to. And then most people I talk to, especially my kid, is like, no, I wouldn't want to be cured of this. It's me. It's just who I am. So calling it a disability, but I know there's everybody has their own journey, but calling it a disability, it is, I have to process that.
It took me about a decade to get to the point where I realized I wouldn't want to get rid of it in my son.
For me, he was there right away, but as a parent, it took me a while to get there, I guess.
Oh, my son wanted to get rid of it for quite some time. But he also grew up in an era where there was a lot of stigma attached to it. And and I think the neurodiversity movement has done a lot to dispel some of the stigma, not all of it, but it's really working on doing that. So neurodiversity is a term coined by Judy Singer, who was an Australian sociologist. So a lot of the really cool stuff around autism seems to come out of Australia. And what she was saying is that neurodiversity is just biodiversity. All brains and minds are different. There's an infinite variation in the biodiversity of brains and hence neurocognitive functioning. So basically, autism is just part of biodiversity. So when we use the term neurological lens, we're saying view and understand behavior and communication as a function of an individual specific neurological profile. So view it as a neurological difference, not a disability. So
Yes.
if when I was talking earlier about what is autism, well, that was really more of a medical model view based upon diagnostic criteria, based upon DSM-5 TR, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 5 TR, which is what psychiatrists, psychologists, and so forth use if they're going to diagnose somebody. And diagnostic criteria has all of these negative stigmatizing terms like deficit and disorder in them.
Mm-hmm.
The neurological or neurodiversity model is more of a social model saying, yeah, there's some neurological differences here. It's all good. So my point here is because of the neurodiversity movement, things are shifting more towards a social model of autism. And as part of that, one of the things I tried to come up with was a metaphor for what are autistic individuals dealing with. And I tried this metaphor out on my son because I was trying to come up with a metaphor to explain to parents of autistic adults that their kids were not necessarily being lazy. Okay, some of them might have been being lazy, but some of them had some fairly decent reasons for shutting down and playing video games all day, mainly because they were exhausted at pretending to be being neurotypical all day. So think about a situation where your internal energy, your internal resources are kind of like a plank or a teeter-totter on top of this pulsating ball of self-regulation. And that ball has three parts. One part is your attentional regulation. Okay. And so you're trying to keep your attention focused. So you're trying to regulate that. The other piece is your sensory input. You're trying to regulate that. And you're terribly sensitive to smells. And there are all these cleaning fluids around. And there's pulsating fluorescent lights. And there's all kinds of noise that really bothers you. And you have no idea if you're hungry or thirsty. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And then there's emotional regulation and anxiety, and your energy's depleted because you had a flat tire on the way to work, and you just got a new request from your boss to get a new proposal out. So that self-regulation ball is twisting and turning, and you're standing on top of this teeter-totter, and you're finding your balance, and you're like, okay, I'm just hanging in there. Then people start throwing balls at you and ask you to juggle while you're balancing. There's a social communication ball. Okay, be nice to your coworkers at the water cooler. All right, handle yourself at this meeting and infer what this project manager wants from you. They didn't tell you what they wanted, but guess, have ESP what they really want when they said XYZ. Okay. We mentioned some of the sensory issues, but it's even worse in this particular meeting because somebody brought some kind of fish stew for lunch. Executive functioning. You're looking at some project plan spreadsheet that makes no sense and you can't make here nor there of it. Co-occurring conditions. All right, maybe you've got some PTSD going on and someone's doing some triggering behavior. Whatever, but you're doing this juggling balancing act and you are trying really hard to pretend to be neurotypical. And that takes a lot of energy. Your average neurotypical person can do this automatically and not spend a ton of active cognitive energy doing this. But if you're autistic, you have to actively think about it. So I decided I got this metaphor kind of right when my son walked over to me and he hugged me and he said, "Mom, that's my day every day." Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then given an opportunity to just turn it all off and play a video game is finally you can relax, I guess.
Right. So my son is sweet and somewhat demonstrative, but he's never that demonstrative. So I was like, okay.
He hugs you.
So, and that metaphor has helped a lot of parents realize that their
Yeah.
adult kids are not jerks. So there is a reason your kid may be doing this if you're a parent. And sometimes they might legitimately be a jerk, but other times they might be putting a lot of energy into trying to survive in the neurotypical world. So, what if the world didn't require them to act? What if, and be something they aren't? What if the world allowed them to be more themselves? What if the world didn't make them have ESP and infer what the project manager wanted them to do? What if the project manager could be more unambiguous in the way they communicated?
Yeah. And this fits right into the reason I formed the autism staffing group. Not to take your idea is so well thought out, but I believe that companies are stronger the more diverse they are, whether that's gender diversity, age diversity, racial diversity, or neurodiversity. So I think that companies are starting to realize that, and they're having a hard time actually finding neurodiverse people that fit the roles in their companies. So I love this. I just love listening to you. I know there's a lot of people joining online, so check in, say hi in the comments. If you have any questions for Michele, put that in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. But if you want to just listen in to this description of what it is to be neurodiverse in a world that is always pressing people to act in the same way, I think Michele's done a great job here with this. Balancing act of different inputs that we all are faced with.
Well, there is another. I did put an example in here of like a tip. Well, tips for employers, so I can find
Yeah.
that somewhere. Where the heck is it?
Tips for parents, tips for employers. Okay, great.
So, when I was at Gartner, one of the things that I was doing is business process management, enterprise architecture, things like management consulting. So I remember doing a survey to understand how many employees within an organization understood their organization's corporate strategy. So the survey I got back, and this is like 6 or 7 years ago, 57% of the employees I had surveyed said they understood their corporate strategy. So the companies I was working with had a better grasp
Yeah.
what was going on
Yeah.
towards people. But it's the same problem. Corporations are doing a bad job of explaining their corporate strategy to rank and file workers. So what does that mean? If workers don't understand the strategy, they can't execute it.
Mhm.
So it means you're not communicating well overall
Yeah.
about important things. And then at the same time, one of the things that we hear about reasons for not hiring autistic workers is, well, they lack empathy, they don't understand. Well, it's actually not true that autistic individuals lack empathy, because they're very empathetic and caring. I can point to countless articles about that and countless examples. But autistic individuals don't have ESP. They don't read minds. Inferencing around what other people are thinking is part of the challenge for them. So if you communicated unambiguously up and down the ranks, it would help autistic workers, and it might actually help the rest of the workers execute on your strategy.
Exactly. The value of having a diverse workforce is it helps you think clearly and communicate clearly.
And the reason I have this picture of the individual here is to remind me to talk about Tom. So Tom was a young man who called me about filing a workplace grievance. against a company, and this was a package delivery company that is always looking for new hires because they have tremendous churn. And he had chosen not to disclose that he was autistic to this organization. Um, and he had been having a lot of problems because even though they had processes and procedures for allocating people to certain vehicles and how those vehicles were supposed to be loaded and routed, they kind of weren't following them.
Hmm.
And his coworkers were giving him the runaround, and he was getting into trouble for that. And no one was explaining to him procedures or like exactly what he was supposed to be doing wearing the uniform. There were just a lot of issues involving poor communication and just a certain amount of nastiness. And we had this very long discussion, and it was like, should he file a grievance? I'm like, well, you probably could. But why don't you just find another job? uh, and my point to this is because of the nastiness of the culture, the unstructured, chaotic nature of the work, even though it was theoretically a structured process organization, they lost a an employee that could have been a very good employee, and this was a company that was,
Yeah.
hurting to hire employees.
And right now we're in a world of record low unemployment, right? And employers are desperate for employees, and for them to there's an untapped resource with neurodivergent people that just aren't they're not accessing, that would be fantastic. And in a lot of cases, just diversity in general is positive, and it's better to have that includes neurodivergent and autistic people in your workforce. But also in some cases they might actually be better at the job just because of some repetitive behaviors or technical skills they bring to a job.
I mean, even if they had compensated him or whatever, I'm thinking this is a nasty environment. It's going to take years before it becomes unnasty. So he's not going to be happy.
No. Good. So we're kind of about out of time, not rushing to close, but is there any kind of any few things you'd like to add?
Well, I guess, yeah, I want to say something about parents, because we need to close. So, looking back, what I would say is don't compare your kid to a neurotypical kid. You may have heard something around the idea that autistic kids may be less socially or emotionally mature than neurotypical kids. And that's often true. I don't know. Some people say 5, 8 years different. I don't really know. But the point is, don't compare your kid to a neurotypical kid. Compare your kid's progress to their own progress over time. And you want to just look at, the future progress that your kid is making. Now, the other thing is going back to my roots as a consultant, as a business process management consultant, and always thinking a good process is one that is designed from the business outcome backwards. Well, your kid doesn't have a business outcome, but your kid has some kind of good outcome in mind. So think about what good looks like for your kid and for you, and kind of think backwards from there. What does a good outcome look like, and what do the two of you need to do to get there? So examine your goals for that future. Do your goals put too much pressure on your kid? Do your goals put you in conflict with your kid's goals? It's got to be a win-win situation. Your kid has to be motivated to get to wherever. So they have to have skin in the game. It's got to be their goals. The other thing is rethink your notion of time. So there's a reason there's a picture of a glacier in the middle of my little cycle picture. And I often say to parents in my support groups that, think like a geologist. Think about the progress of time like a glacial pace. And they laugh, and I'm like, no, no, no. I'm serious, because if you expect that everything will be resolved in 2 years, you're going to be upset. It could take 2 years, but it could take 10. You don't know. So be patient and have a backup plan, and be thrilled if it takes a short time. And so shift your view of good from a destination to a cycle of change. So as long as you're going through the cycle and your kid's going through that cycle, it's good. And don't go it alone. You know, have other people. In the beginning of this journey, I had those moms who I'm now paying it forward to. I still have a clan of people, mostly at AANE, because they're kind of my family now. But get a parent coach, join a parent support group. Doesn't have to be at AANE, but don't do it alone. And for those of you who are autistic adults who are listening to this, again, don't compare yourself to other non-autistic people. Be realistic and be kind to yourself. You're doing the best you can do.
Yeah. This is maybe a bit philosophical, but I'm a big fan of the book of Ecclesiastes. And its kind of summary is, if you can have a good conversation with your friends, a good meal, and enjoy sun on your face, that's a good day. So, sometimes that's just, if you can be in the moment in life and enjoy the joy where you are, that's success. So whether it's sending your kid to college and they fail out in the first semester and they come home and then they go to technical school and then they fail out and then they go back to technical school and then they find success, or just be in the moment and enjoying the good day that you have today, I guess.
Right. So if I were to close, I would say, tell an autistic person in your life that you love them because they are autistic, not despite it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that they hear that, because autism is an intrinsic part of who they are. You're not going to grow out of it. It's not something that needs to be fixed. It really shapes that person, and it shapes their identity and who they are. So I got to the point where I understood. I love autism. Yeah, I might take it out on my kid for 5 seconds because it would make his life easier, but I'd have to put it back, because he wouldn't be the funny, unfailingly honest, sweet, noble young man he is without it.
Exactly. I've, on the front of my website, I have a quote from Greta Thunberg. It says that she loves that she's autistic. She never would have accomplished anything that she did in her life without it, and that's who she is. So I feel the same way. That I totally agree with your idea that we need to share our love and appreciation for the people in our lives who are autistic, and everybody where they are, but especially a little reminder for those autistic people in our lives that we love them just the way they are.
And they may not know that. I mean, you may think they know that, but they don't know that. I mean, when I actually said it that way to my son, he looked at me like I had 5 heads.
Mm-hmm. Well, Michelle, I've really enjoyed our discussion today. I think a lot of other people have also, and we'll post this on my website and on LinkedIn and YouTube, and lots of people are going to see this and be encouraged by the work you're doing, the journey you've been on with your son, and how we all should reflect in love with those around us, especially our neurodivergent loved ones.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a good time. And maybe we can do this again, different topic in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay,
Bye,
bye-bye.
everybody.